you hear me? Can you hear me? Well, when I took lessons on the violin as a teenager, I had no idea that I would be interested in doing improvised music or anything like improvised music. But then I moved to New York because I was interested in the kind of things that were happening with Fluxus at the time. And the thing about Fluxus was that it sort of had this feeling of anything goes. It took ordinary musical performance and converted it through the lens of John Cage into a situation where it was really the responsibility of the listener to make the choice that they liked what they were hearing. You know, anything that you heard, it was if you don't like it, it's your problem. So do something about it. Get busy liking, do some liking. So this was like fantastic because I was really a crappy violin player. I play these scores and I would play them pretty badly. And I liked that I could play them badly. And if they didn't like it, then too effing bad. It was like a trigger. It triggered me. And all of a sudden I realized I can play music anytime I want to. I started playing music, like for example, I would just play one note for a long time because I enjoyed that very much. I enjoyed the timbres and combinations of tones, and I would strum the guitar or play my violin very slow for a long time, and I really enjoyed that. That was great. But this wasn't really doing any kind of sort of public music. So the next thing that happened, my friend Lamont Young started a group, and he had a thing going where he was sort of doing this kind of something like Indian music, but it had a drone, and I loved that sustained sound, you know. It had a drone, and then he would play the soprano saxophone, you know. And I thought, cool, New York style, you know, like drone music, New York style drone music. Lamont, I'd like to play in the group, but I'd like to play drone. So it just came, you know, then that happened, you know. And then I realized I can play music with anybody. And I started playing with my friends, you know, like the first improvised music I started actually doing outside of what I described was a little set I did with Angus MacLeese. And yeah, it was okay. You know, I taped it. And you could tape it. So I and my different friends, you know, that were working with these people and so forth, we started doing music and recording it and hanging out, and I didn't know what this was that was happening. I used to think of it as downtown ethnic music, like just this music that was happening because there were these freaks who would, you know, like take some drugs or something like that and hang out and just make sounds, you know, and hang out and make sounds, and nothing ever happened twice. So I guess you'd call it, now you'd call it improvised music, sort of, yeah. But it was also, in its way, free jazz. I mean, who knows where the boundaries of these things are? You know, it's hard to say where the boundaries of these things are. And some of the things that we did, some of them were very disciplined. Some of them were extraordinarily disciplined, and others things that we did were just completely trashy and weird. Like, for example, this guy that I knew, Dave, he was like a complete amphetamine freak and a thief, and he stole equipment, and I don't know. He gave me a reverb chamber. Reverb chamber? Whoa! So what do? We plug stuff into the reverb chamber and start just, going for it. Now, that's sort of like experimental music in its most primitive guise. Experimental music, instrumental music, whatever, sounds, free sounds, but I don't think it was so much a matter of sounds as really the fact that people have a real need for musical sound, and noise is a part of that if it's contextualized as music. There's something about our brains that really grabs a hold of melodies and notes and sound of things going on in between one another and across cultures even. You can cross cultures. We started listening to music from all kinds of places and with all kinds of different emphasis. And then you can layer over it with something like spirituality or terror. Now, my favorite at the time was actually a kind of sound that I started getting into with amplified strings, especially playing with John Cale, who was really a great addition to this group that we had with Lamont Young and Marion Zazila and Angus McLeese. And with John and me playing strings together, we got this gigantic amplified sound going on that was like, the closest thing I can describe to it now is like heavy metal. It's like, just like roaring over you, like just so much energy, so much power, just this huge thing rolling at you. So the funny part of it at the time, this was in like 1962, 63, 64, 65, 66. Like in these years, there was no context for sort of like packaging this, or the idea that you would actually do performances of this kind of like hopelessly like vague, doped out, weird, crappy sound. It was just insane, like, what? Like we're gonna actually do performances? I don't think so. This is for me. It's for me. Yeah, so take it or leave it, like that. And this was a good habit of thought. To be able to feel that way, I thought was special, because honestly, I knew I could never break into the hotsy-totsy thing of like real, quotes, music. And I did learn to control my taste, because there was certain kind of music I hated, like easy listening, rock and roll. I liked, originally, like as a teenager, I liked romantic classical music, but then I learned to like avant-garde music pretty quick, but it was very hard to like rock and roll. So I practiced and practiced, listened to a lot of rock and roll records, and I ripped off a lot of 45s and listened to them over and over. Then I really got to love them, you know, but I was not really interested in performing this stuff, you know. I wasn't interested in the institutionalized form. I was more interested in the way that it just went way over into some other, like, woe-begotten space. But I'll tell you something. The serious stuff with the serious aims, you know, like figuring out seriously what to do to make music really bend and go in another direction. It's just not like the work that I did with the group with Lamont Young and John. That made a mark. Made a huge mark. And the other stuff was more elusive. It was more socially elusive. It wasn't so well socially defined. And it was still hard for us to believe in that, even as late as the 70s. You know? Yeah, so as late as the 70s, you know, this was still the, I think, still underground, fooling around, warping out, going crazy, improv, you know, hanging out music was still like just the edge. That's my story.